Her millionaire husband left her with nothing after the divorce. She didn't beg, but did what no one expected. I need you to sign these papers, Isla. Today, Julian Harrington stood in the doorway of his office at Harrington's, Chicago's most celebrated restaurant. The restaurant Isla had built with her own hands, her own recipes, her own genius. He adjusted his Rolex with that casual precision she'd once found attractive and now recognized as dismissive. Sign what papers? The divorce papers. I'm getting remarried to Victoria Ashmore. We've been together for 8 months. Isla felt the air leave her lungs. The kitchen noise from downstairs faded into a dull roar. She'd spent the morning perfecting a new dessert, her hands covered in flour and sugar, thinking about their life together. And he'd spent it planning her erasure. You've been cheating on me for 8 months. I've been building strategic partnerships. There's a difference. Victoria's father owns the Ashmore Hotel Group. The merger opportunities alone will triple our footprint. Julian, we're married. We built this restaurant together. He laughed. Actually, that's the interesting part. My lawyers have reviewed all the documentation. Your name isn't on any of the intellectual property. Not the recipes, not the patents, not the trademarks. Nothing. Legally, you were just an employee. A well-compensated one, but still, just an employee. That's not possible. Those are my recipes, my innovations, my 7 years of work. Are they? Because according to every legal document, every filing, every official record, I'm the chef and owner of record. My name is on everything. You have no claim to any of it. Isla stared at the man she'd loved, the man she'd built an empire with, and saw a stranger. You planned this. I protected my investment. The settlement includes $500,000 and a comprehensive NDA. You won't speak publicly about your supposed role in Harrington's success. In return, you walk away comfortable. And if I refuse, then my legal team will destroy you. They'll present evidence that you were kitchen staff, not a creative force. By the time they're finished, no restaurant in this city will touch you. You'll never work in a serious kitchen again. He picked up his briefcase, preparing to walk out. Out of their restaurant, out of their marriage, out of her life. You're brilliant in the kitchen, Isla, but you were never cut out for my world. You're too quiet, too uncomfortable with the spotlight. Victoria understands what it takes to succeed at this level. You never did. Have you ever poured your heart into building something with someone, only to discover they were erasing you the entire time? Have you ever been told that your genius was just assistance, that your 7 years of creation were just employment? Have you ever loved someone so completely that you didn't see them stealing your entire future until it was too late? This isn't just a story about divorce. This is about a woman who created culinary magic that earned 3 Michelin stars and a James Beard Award, only to discover that the man she loved had made sure her name appeared on absolutely nothing. And when he decided to trade her in for a woman with better social connections, he tried to take everything. Her recipes, her innovations, her reputation, her entire career. But Julian Harrington made one catastrophic mistake. He thought that because Isla Bennett loved him, she was weak. He thought that because she'd never fought for credit or fame, she had no power. He thought he could erase her from the story of her own genius, and she'd simply disappear. He had no idea who he was dealing with. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone steal credit for your work, if you've ever had to rebuild your entire life from absolutely nothing, you need to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button right now because what Isla did next is absolutely legendary. That conversation happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 hours before dinner service at Harrington's. Isla had arrived early, as she always did, to prep for the evening. She'd been working on a new amuse-bouche, a play on her grandmother's French onion soup deconstructed into a single perfect bite. She was thinking about flavor profiles and temperature contrasts, and whether the Gruyere foam would hold its structure. She wasn't thinking about betrayal, wasn't thinking about divorce, wasn't thinking that her entire world was about to detonate. Julian had called her upstairs. His office occupied the entire second floor of the building, overlooking Michigan Avenue. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, photographs covering the walls. But as Isla climbed those stairs, still in her chef's coat, she noticed something she'd somehow never seen before. Every single photograph showed Julian. Julian accepting their first Michelin star. Julian shaking hands with celebrity diners. Julian being interviewed for Bon Appetit magazine. Julian at the James Beard Awards ceremony. Julian. Isla appeared in exactly none of them. How had she never noticed? 7 years of building this restaurant, of creating every innovative dish that made Harrington's famous, and she'd been photographically erased from her own success story. She should have known then, should have turned around and walked out. But she'd loved him, trusted him, believed they were partners in every sense of the word. She'd been catastrophically wrong. To understand how completely Julian destroyed Isla, you need to understand how they built Harrington's together. Or rather, how Isla built it while Julian took credit. They'd met 9 years earlier, when Isla was 26 and working as a sous chef at Morton's Steakhouse. It was a good job, a respectable position, but Isla had bigger dreams. She wanted to create, to innovate, to push culinary boundaries. Morton's wasn't that kind of place. It was consistent, traditional, reliable. Those were good qualities, but they weren't enough for someone with Isla's vision. Julian Harrington had come to Morton's for a business dinner. Old Chicago money, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. His family owned commercial real estate across the Midwest. Shopping centers, office buildings, apartment complexes. The Harrington name opened doors that most people didn't even know existed. But Julian wanted something different. He was tired of being just another trust fund heir managing his family's portfolio. He wanted to create something of his own. Something creative. Something that would make him more than his last name. He wanted a restaurant empire. He had the capital. He had the connections. He had the business expertise from his MBA at Northwestern. What he didn't have was any culinary talent whatsoever. He could barely cook scrambled eggs. That's where Isla came in. She'd sent out a perfectly cooked ribeye that night, charred exterior and butter-soft interior, accompanied by her own twist on a poivre sauce. Julian had asked to meet the chef. When Isla emerged from the kitchen, still in her whites, he'd looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "This is extraordinary. Who taught you to cook like this?" "My grandmother, mostly. She was from Lyon. Came to America after World War II. She believed food should tell a story and make you feel something." Julian had smiled. "I'm opening a restaurant. I have the money and the business knowledge, but I need someone with your kind of talent. Someone who can create dishes that Chicago has never seen before. Would you be interested in a partnership?" Isla had been dazzled. This sophisticated, handsome man who moved through the world with such confidence was offering her exactly what she'd been dreaming about. A chance to create, to innovate, to build something extraordinary. She'd said yes without hesitation. For the first 6 months, they'd worked side by side developing the concept for Harrington's. Isla created the menu while Julian handled everything else. The location, a stunning building in River North. The build-out, all gleaming stainless steel and warm wood. The hiring, front-of-house staff who understood fine dining service. The marketing, building buzz before they even opened. It was supposed to be a 50-50 partnership. Equal stake, equal control, equal credit. But when the incorporation papers were filed, only Julian's name appeared as owner. When Isla had questioned it, Julian had smiled and explained that it was simpler this way for tax purposes. They were planning to get married anyway. What difference did it make whose name was on the paperwork? And Isla, young and in love and trusting, had believed him. Julian had proposed a year after they met. Right there in the Harrington's kitchen, before the restaurant opened, surrounded by gleaming equipment and infinite possibility. He'd gotten down on one knee on the concrete floor and pulled out a ring that cost more than Isla made in a year. "Marry me. Let's build something bigger than a restaurant. Let's build a life." She'd said yes, tears streaming down her face, believing with her whole heart that they were partners, that they were equals, that his success was her success, and vice versa. The wedding had been small and elegant. Her family, working-class folks from Indiana, had been intimidated by Julian's world. His family, old-money Chicago society, had been politely distant with Isla. She was a chef, after all. Staff, essentially, not quite the right background for a Harrington. But none of that mattered because she had Julian, and together they were going to change Chicago's culinary scene. Harrington's opened to immediate acclaim. The food was like nothing Chicago had seen before. Isla took classic French techniques and made them modern, playful, surprising. She incorporated unexpected flavors, sustainable ingredients, presentations that were art on a plate. Every dish told a story. Every bite created an emotional experience. The critics were rapturous. The reservations filled up months in advance. The industry awards started rolling in, and every single one listed Julian Harrington as the creative genius behind it all. Rising star restaurateur Julian Harrington brings French innovation to Chicago, the Tribune wrote. Julian Harrington's bold vision reshapes fine dining, Bon Appetit declared. The James Beard Award for Best Chef Great Lakes Region went to Julian Harrington. 3 Michelin stars were awarded to Harrington's, with Julian's photo in the guide. Ayla's name appeared in small print, if at all. Executive Chef Isla Harrington, Kitchen Director, Culinary Team Member, never as the creator, never as the innovator, never as the genius behind every dish that made the restaurant famous. And Isla, because she loved Julian and believed they were a team, didn't fight for credit, didn't demand her name on the awards, didn't insist on interviews or photo shoots or recognition. She was content to create in the kitchen while Julian represented them publicly. After all, he was better at that part. He was comfortable with investors and critics and cameras. He knew how to work a room, how to charm reporters, how to build the brand. Isla was shy, introverted, uncomfortable with attention. She preferred to let her food speak for itself. So she created, and he took credit, and she told herself it didn't matter because they were married. They were partners. What difference did it make whose name was bigger? For 7 years, that's how Harrington's operated. Isla in the kitchen, working 18-hour days, creating every innovative dish, training the staff, perfecting every technique. Julian in the spotlight, accepting awards, courting investors, building the Harrington brand. They bought a brownstone in Lincoln Park. They traveled to Paris and Tokyo and Copenhagen, studying at the world's best restaurants. They talked about opening a second location someday, about starting a family eventually. Isla thought they were building a future together. But Julian was building something entirely different. He was building an empire with his name on it, making sure that legally and publicly, Isla's contributions could be erased whenever convenient. And that moment came when he met Victoria Ashmore. Victoria appeared at a charity gala 18 months before the divorce. Blonde, beautiful, from a family even wealthier than Julian's. Her father owned the Ashmore Hotel Group, luxury properties in every major city in America. She moved through high society with the ease of someone born into it, someone who'd never had to prove she belonged. She was everything Isla wasn't. Comfortable with publicity, socially connected. From the right family, the right background, the right world. Julian had mentioned her casually at first. I met someone interesting tonight. Victoria Ashmore. Her family's in hospitality. Could be good connections for us. Then more frequently, Victoria invited us to her family's place in Lake Forest this weekend. Victoria's father wants to discuss potential collaborations. Victoria suggested I join the board of the Culinary Arts Foundation. Isla had pushed down the unease, told herself she was being paranoid. Julian loved her. They'd built a life together. She was imagining problems that didn't exist. She'd been so focused on the kitchen, on perfecting her craft, that she didn't see what was happening until it was far too late. Julian had been systematically setting up his exit strategy, making sure every legal document listed him as sole owner, making sure every piece of intellectual property was registered in his name only, making sure that when he decided to trade Isla in for someone more suitable to his ambitions, she'd have no legal ground to stand on. And then, on that Tuesday afternoon, he'd pulled the trigger. Now, standing in his office, Isla looked at the divorce papers he'd slid across his desk. Her hands were shaking. The words blurred together. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. This isn't real. Julian, we can work through whatever problems we're having. We can go to counseling, we can talk, There's nothing to work through. I'm in love with Victoria. We're planning to announce our engagement next month, after the divorce is filed. Next month? You've already planned that far ahead? Victoria and I have been discussing our future for a while now. The merger between Harrington's and Ashmore Hotel Group will create a hospitality empire. Destination restaurants in every major city. This is what I've always wanted. Isla felt like she was drowning, gasping for air that wouldn't come. What about what we wanted? What about the plans we made together? I've outgrown those plans. I've outgrown this version of my life. Julian's voice was clinical, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than destroying their marriage. Victoria understands the social requirements of success at this level. She knows how to work with investors, how to handle the press, how to build the right relationships. You've always been uncomfortable with all of that. Because I'm a chef, I create food. That's what I'm good at. Exactly. You're good in the kitchen. but I need a partner who's good everywhere else too. Each word was precisely aimed to wound. He was weaponizing every insecurity Isla had ever shared with him. Her shyness around investors, her discomfort with cameras, her preference for creating overperforming, all of it twisted into proof that she was inadequate. The recipes I created, Isla said, fighting to keep her voice steady. The innovations that earned us 3 Michelin stars. Those are mine. Are they? Julian pulled out a folder, opened it to reveal pages of legal documentation. Every recipe developed at Harrington's is registered as proprietary property of Harrington Hospitality Group, which I own 100% of. Every technique, every menu concept, every innovation, it all belongs to the company, which belongs to me. But I created them, while employed by my company, which makes them work for hire. And my lawyers have been very thorough, Isla. You have no legal claim to any of the intellectual property developed during your time here. The betrayal was so enormous that Isla almost couldn't process it. My time here? Julian, I built this restaurant. Every dish that made us famous came from my mind, my creativity, my work. You created recipes. I created the restaurant. There's a difference. I provided the capital, the location, the brand, the business infrastructure. You were the kitchen staff. Talented kitchen staff, certainly, but ultimately replaceable. Replaceable. The word hit like a physical blow. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of 18-hour days. 7 years of pouring every ounce of her creativity into building something she thought they owned together. And to Julian, she was replaceable. I won't sign this. Isla pushed the papers back across the desk. I won't agree to pretend I had nothing to do with Harrington's success. Then you'll force me to go to court, and my lawyers will bury you. They'll bring in colleagues who'll testify that I was always the creative vision while you simply executed my concepts. They'll present documentation showing you were an employee, nothing more. They'll systematically destroy any claim you try to make. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. By the time they're finished, Isla, you'll be unhireable in this industry. Your name will be synonymous with bitter ex-wife making delusional accusations. No serious restaurant will touch you. You'll be finished. You do that to me? After everything we built together? I'll do what's necessary to protect my business and my reputation. The settlement I'm offering is generous. $500,000. That's more than enough to start over. Go to another city. Find a new career. Move on with your life. Julian walked to the door, then paused. I do hope you'll be reasonable about this, Isla. For your own sake. You're a talented woman, but you were never cut out for my world. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. He walked out, leaving her standing in his office, surrounded by photographs of his success built on her genius. Isla stood there for a long time. The sounds of the kitchen drifted up from below. Her staff preparing for dinner service. Her recipes being executed by people she'd trained. Her innovations making money for a man who was divorcing her and taking everything. She thought about going downstairs, continuing with service as if nothing had changed, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold a knife. Her vision was blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her entire world had just collapsed, and she couldn't pretend otherwise. Isla Bennett walked out of Harrington's that afternoon and didn't look back. She never returned. Not for her knives, her notebooks, her personal belongings. She couldn't bear to see the kitchen that had been her sanctuary, knowing it had never actually been hers at all. The divorce papers sat unsigned on her kitchen counter for 3 months. 3 months, during which Isla lived in a haze of shock and grief and rage. She'd rented a tiny studio apartment in Pilsen with what little money she had in her personal account. Everything else was tied up in investments Julian controlled, in the brownstone he'd already had transferred solely into his name, in the life she no longer had access to. She hired an attorney. Marcus Webb worked out of a modest office in a less fashionable part of Chicago, but he came highly recommended for divorce cases involving significant assets. He reviewed her situation with grim resignation. Legally, you're in a very difficult position. Marcus spread the documents across his desk. Every piece of intellectual property is registered to Harrington Hospitality Group. You're listed as an employee in all the corporate documentation. There's no paper trail establishing you as a creative partner or CO developer. But everyone knows I created those recipes. Everyone at the restaurant saw me developing them. Can you prove it? Do you have preliminary sketches in your handwriting? Development notes? Witnesses who'll testify to your creative role? Isla thought about her colleagues at Harrington's. Good people, talented people, people with mortgages and families and careers to protect. Would any of them risk Julian's wrath to testify for her? The answer was no, and they both knew it. Julian Harrington is one of the most powerful restaurateurs in Chicago. Anyone who testifies against him in a legal battle risks being blacklisted. Marcus's voice was gentle but honest. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's reality, so I have no options. The settlement he's offering is substantial. $500,000. That's enough to relocate, start over, build a new life. I don't want to start over somewhere else. I want to cook here, in Chicago, in the industry I helped build. Then you'll have to do it without ever claiming credit for anything you created at Harrington's. The NDA is comprehensive. If you sign it, you're agreeing never to discuss your role in developing the restaurant's menu or make any claims about creating their signature dishes. Isla felt the trap closing around her. So my choices are disappear entirely, or stay and pretend I contributed nothing? Those are your choices. I'm sorry, Isla. Sometimes the law doesn't deliver justice. Sometimes it just delivers what's documented. She'd left Marcus's office with the papers in her bag and rage burning in her chest. This couldn't be how her story ended. Erased, dismissed, told to quietly disappear while Julian built an empire on her genius. But what choice did she have? Julian's lawyers had been thorough, methodical. They'd set up a legal structure that made her invisible, made her disposable, made her nothing more than an employee who could be replaced. Fighting would mean going to war with someone who had unlimited resources and powerful connections. It would mean years of legal battles she'd probably lose. It would mean burning through her settlement money on attorney fees. It would mean making herself unemployable by becoming known as the bitter ex-wife making accusations. As much as Isla wanted justice, she understood the math. She couldn't win. Not legally, not publicly, not through traditional channels. 3 months after Julian had devastated her world, Isla Bennett signed the divorce papers. She sat in her tiny studio apartment, pen in hand, staring at the documents that would officially end her marriage and legally erase her from the story of Harrington's success. The settlement was indeed generous by most standards. $500,000. More money than she'd ever had in her personal account. Enough to start over, if she could figure out how. But the price was her silence, her history, her right to ever claim the work that was rightfully hers. Isla signed her name, not Isla Harrington anymore. She'd already filed paperwork to legally change back to her maiden name, Isla Bennett. A fresh start, a clean break from the man who'd used her and discarded her. The signed papers went back to Julian's lawyers. The money appeared in her account within a week, and to the outside world, Isla Harrington simply vanished from Chicago's culinary scene. The food blogs noted her absence briefly. Executive chef Isla Harrington has left Harrington's to pursue other opportunities. Julian Harrington will continue to oversee the kitchen personally. That was it. 7 years of innovation summed up in a single dismissive sentence. 3 weeks later, society pages announced Julian and Victoria's engagement. The photographs showed them at some charity gala, Victoria's hand displaying a diamond the size of a quail egg, both of them smiling like they'd won the lottery. The announcement mentioned the upcoming merger of Harrington's and Ashmore Hotel Group, plans for destination restaurants in New York, Los Angeles, Miami. A culinary empire built on Isla's genius, with her name appearing nowhere. Isla stared at those photographs for a long time. This was her replacement. This was the woman Julian had decided was more valuable. Not because Victoria could create anything, but because she came from the right family, moved in the right circles, understood how to play the game at the level Julian wanted. Isla had been traded in like an outdated car, useful for a while, but ultimately not quite right for the image Julian wanted to project. She closed her laptop, walked to her tiny kitchen, and started cooking. Not for a restaurant, not for critics or awards or recognition, just for herself. To remember who she was underneath all the pain and betrayal. To reconnect with the part of herself that loved cooking before it became tied up in Julian's ambition. Isla made her grandmother's coq au vin, the recipe that had started everything. As she worked, muscle memory took over, the methodical prep, the careful technique, the moment when individual ingredients transformed into something greater than their parts. This was who she was, not Julian's kitchen staff, not a replaceable employee, not someone whose contributions could be erased with legal paperwork. She was a chef, a creator, an innovator. And Julian Harrington had made a catastrophic mistake thinking he could take that from her. If you've ever felt invisible while someone else took credit for your work, stay with me. If you've ever wondered whether starting over from nothing is even possible, you need to see what happens next. Because Isla's comeback doesn't start with rage or revenge. It starts with humility and patience and a plan Julian will never see coming. Isla Bennett took a job as a line cook at a diner in Pilsen called Rosie's. 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. She cooked eggs over easy and pancakes and burgers and fries. Simple food, honest food, food that had nothing to do with Michelin stars or culinary innovation. The humiliation of it burned. She'd been executive chef at a 3 Michelin star restaurant. She'd won a James Beard Award, even if Julian's name was on it. She'd created dishes that made food critics weep. And now she was flipping eggs for $8 an hour plus tips. The other cooks at Rosie's had no idea who she was. No idea about her background or her training or what she'd accomplished. They just knew her as Isla, the new girl who showed up on time and kept her head down and never complained. That anonymity was both painful and necessary. Isla needed to survive, needed to eat and pay rent and have a foundation to build from. The settlement money was her future, her chance to rebuild. She couldn't touch it for basic survival. So she fried bacon and scrambled eggs and tried not to think about how far she'd fallen. But at night, after her shifts, Isla returned to her studio apartment and did the real work. She cooked. She experimented. She innovated. She took the techniques she'd mastered over years and pushed them further, bolder, into territory Julian's conservative palate would never have approved. And she documented everything, every recipe, every technique, every innovation, all of it meticulously recorded in notebooks with her name, her handwriting, dates, detailed notes. This would never happen again. Never again would someone be able to claim her work as their own. Never again would she create something without proof of her authorship. The notebooks filled up, pages and pages of culinary experiments. Some failures, many successes. Isla was finding her voice again. Not the voice that had built Harrington's within Julian's vision, but her own authentic voice. Bolder, more daring, uncompromised. 6 months after the divorce, Isla met Carmen Rodriguez. Carmen was a server at Rosie's, 32 years old, single mother of a 6-year-old daughter, and one of the sharpest people Isla had ever met. She had a business degree from DePaul but had dropped out of corporate America after her daughter was born. The hours didn't work with single parenthood. The diner gave her flexibility, but Carmen had dreams bigger than breakfast shifts and lunch rushes. They started talking during employee meals, the 30-minute break when the kitchen staff ate before the lunch rush. Carmen had noticed the way Isla cooked, even simple diner food, the attention to technique, the small touches that elevated everything. "You're way too good for this place," Carmen said one afternoon, watching Isla transform a basic burger into something extraordinary with just a few adjustments. "I needed a job. Rosie's hired me, but you've got real training. I can tell. Where did you cook before?" Isla hesitated. The NDA prevented her from discussing her role at Harrington's, but it didn't prevent her from acknowledging she'd worked there, around, different places. "I was at Harrington's for a while." Carmen's eyes widened. "The Harrington's? The Michelin star place?" "Yeah. Why'd you leave?" "Didn't work out." Isla kept her voice neutral. "Sometimes you need a fresh start." Carmen studied her for a moment, clearly sensing there was more to the story. But she didn't push. "Well, fresh start or not, you should have your own place, your own restaurant. That takes money I don't have." "What about investors? A business loan?" Isla thought about the settlement money sitting in her account. She had capital, yes, but opening a traditional restaurant required more. Permits, build-out, equipment, staff, months of operating expenses before turning a profit. She'd need at least $1 million to do it right. She had half that. "The math doesn't work," Isla said. "Not yet anyway." Carmen nodded thoughtfully. "What about a pop-up?" "A what?" "A pop-up restaurant. Low overhead, no permanent location. You do limited dinner services, maybe once or twice a week. Test your concepts, build a following. If it takes off, then you think about something permanent." Isla felt something stir in her chest. Something that might have been hope. Where would I even do something like that? "My cousin owns a warehouse space in Logan Square. He runs a furniture restoration business there, but it's empty on weekends. I bet he'd let us use it cheap." Maybe even free if we gave him a cut of the profits. Us? Carmen smiled. You think I want to serve scrambled eggs forever? I've got a business degree and organizational skills you wouldn't believe. You cook, I'll handle everything else. Front of house, reservations, atmosphere, the business side. 50-50 partners, everything documented and legal. That last part hit hard. Everything documented and legal. Carmen didn't know the full story, but somehow she understood what Isla needed to hear. I'd need to think about it, think fast. Carmen stood, clearing her plate. Because talent like yours doesn't belong hidden in a diner kitchen, and I'm not letting you waste it. That conversation planted a seed that grew into something extraordinary. Isla spent 2 weeks developing a concept. A 7-course tasting menu that showcased everything she'd been experimenting with. Bold flavors, unexpected combinations, techniques that push boundaries while remaining deeply, emotionally satisfying. She called it Bennett's Table, her maiden name. Her identity reclaimed, her chance to prove that Isla Bennett was a force in her own right, separate from anything Harrington's had been. Carmen's cousin agreed to let them use the warehouse space on Saturday nights. $50 per event, plus 10% of profits. It was more than generous. They set up the first dinner for 20 people. Carmen handled the logistics, transforming the warehouse into an intimate dining space with second-hand tables and chairs, string lights, carefully curated music. Isla handled the food, every dish a statement about who she was as a chef. The menu was a journey, an amuse-bouche that played with her French heritage, an appetizer that combined unexpected ingredients into perfect harmony, a seafood course that showcased her technical precision, a meat course that demonstrated her understanding of flavor, a cheese course that was pure whimsy, a pre-dessert that reset the palate, and a final dessert that was an emotional meditation on transformation. They charged $75 per person, barely enough to cover food costs and the space rental. This wasn't about profit yet. This was about proving a concept. The first guests arrived on a Saturday evening in October, 8 months after Ila's world had ended. They were friends of Carmen's mostly. People curious about this mysterious chef doing something unusual in a Logan Square warehouse. Isla cooked like her life depended on it. Because in a way it did. This was her chance to prove that her talent was real, was hers, could stand on its own without Julian's name attached. Each course went out perfect, precise, exactly as she'd envisioned it. And the reaction was everything she'd hoped for. People stopped talking mid-conversation to focus on the food, made sounds of pure pleasure, closed their eyes to better savor flavors. When the final course was served, the room broke into spontaneous applause. Isla emerged from the makeshift kitchen, still in her whites, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Pride. Not pride in someone else's success. Pride in her own work, her own vision, her own achievement. That was extraordinary, a woman said, approaching Isla. Where did you train? France, mostly. And here in Chicago. Will you do this again? If people want it, yes. They wanted it. Word spread through food blogs, Instagram, whispered recommendations. The second dinner sold out in 12 hours. The third in 6 hours. By the fourth dinner, Bennett's Table had a waiting list. Isla and Carmen operated Bennett's Table every Saturday night. 20 guests. 7 courses. Food that made people remember why they loved eating in the first place. And Isla was careful. So careful. She never mentioned Harrington's in any interviews or social media posts. Never hinted at her connection to Julian. Simply presented herself as what her business registration claimed. A chef pursuing her own vision. Bennett's Table grew from a whisper to a hum to a conversation. Food bloggers started showing up. Local journalists. People who cared about truly exceptional dining and didn't need a Michelin star to tell them what was worth their time. 10 months after the first service, everything changed when David Chen walked through the door. David Chen was one of the most respected food critics in Chicago. He wrote for Chicago Magazine and consulted for the Michelin Guide. His reviews could make or break a restaurant. And he'd somehow gotten a reservation to Bennett's Table without Isla knowing who he was. Carmen didn't realize either until after service, when she was clearing tables and overheard him talking on his phone. Yes, I'm serious. Best meal I've had in Chicago in 5 years. I need to find out more about this chef. Who is Isla Bennett? Where did she come from? Carmen's face went pale. She caught Isla in the kitchen, where she was breaking down her station. That was David Chen. Table 7. The guy in the blue shirt who kept taking notes. Isla felt her heart stop. David Chen? Are you sure? Positive. I just heard him on the phone talking about writing a review. Terror flooded through Isla's system. David Chen knew Chicago's culinary scene intimately. If he started digging into her background, he'd find the connection to Harrington's. He'd find the divorce. He might write about it in ways that could be construed as Isla violating the NDA. What do we do? Carmen asked. Nothing. We can't stop him from writing whatever he writes. Isla forced herself to breathe. I haven't mentioned Harrington's. I haven't claimed credit for any of their dishes. If he connects the dots, that's him doing journalism, not me violating the agreement. But what if Julian comes after you? Then I'll deal with it. Isla cleaned her knives with shaking hands. I'm not going to stop cooking because I'm afraid of him. The waiting was excruciating. 2 weeks of wondering what David Chen would write, if he'd write anything at all. 2 weeks of running worst-case scenarios. 2 weeks of Isla barely sleeping, convinced Julian's lawyers would descend any moment. The review ran on a Wednesday morning, exactly 14 days after Chen's visit. Carmen called Isla at 6 in the morning. Her voice was shaking. Isla, you need to read this. Right now. Isla opened her laptop with trembling hands. The headline appeared on Chicago Magazine's website. Bennett's Table, the future of Chicago dining, hidden in a Logan Square warehouse. In 20 years of reviewing restaurants, I've rarely been as stunned as I was by Bennett's Table. The review continued in David Chen's precise, analytical style. Chef Isla Bennett is creating food that doesn't just push boundaries, it redefines them. Each dish is technically flawless yet emotionally resonant, innovative yet comforting, bold yet nuanced. This is cooking at the highest level, made even more remarkable by the humble setting. Isla read with her heart pounding, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for him to mention Harrington's, to dig into her past, to create the controversy that would violate her NDA. But Chen's review focused entirely on Bennett's Table, on the food she was creating now, not where she'd come from. He analyzed each course with the expertise of someone who understood technique and creativity. He praised her vision, her execution, her ability to make diners feel something profound. If Bennett's Table were a traditional restaurant, it would earn 3 Michelin stars within a year. As it stands, it's the worst-kept secret among Chicago's serious food lovers, and the most exciting culinary development in the city in a decade. The review concluded with a simple statement. Chef Isla Bennett is a name you need to know. Remember it. She's going to change everything. Isla sat in her studio apartment, reading and rereading those words. A respected critic had just told Chicago's entire culinary world that she was extraordinary. Not as Julian's employee, not as kitchen staff at Harrington's, as herself. As Isla Bennett, chef and creator. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Bennett's Table's email exploded with reservation requests. Hundreds in the first hour. Thousands by the end of the day. Carmen had to create a waiting list system because they could only accommodate 20 people per week. Food bloggers and journalists started calling. Could they interview Isla? Feature Bennett's Table in their publications? Document the cooking process? And then people started asking questions about Isla's background. Where had she trained? Where had she worked before? How had someone this talented remained unknown? It took less than a week for someone to make the connection. A junior food writer doing research for a profile piece found Isla's Columbia records, found the gap between graduation and the founding of Bennett's Table, started searching for what she'd been doing during those missing years, found the marriage certificate. Isla Bennett had been Isla Harrington. She'd been married to Julian Harrington. She'd worked at Harrington's for 7 years before the divorce. The story broke like a thunderclap. Former Harrington's chef emerges as underground dining sensation. Mystery chef Isla Bennett connected to Harrington's empire. Julian Harrington's ex-wife building her own culinary legacy. Within 24 hours, Isla's carefully maintained separation from her past evaporated. Every food publication in Chicago was running some version of the story. Social media exploded with speculation and commentary. The architecture world that had been impressed by Bennett's Table was now ravenous for the personal drama behind it. Carmen burst into Isla's apartment, waving her phone. It's everywhere, Isla. Every major publication is running the story. They're digging into your marriage, the divorce, your time at Harrington's. Isla had known this moment would come eventually. The truth was too compelling, too dramatic for the press to ignore. but she'd hoped to control the narrative, to reveal her connection on her own terms. What are they saying? Isla's voice was calmer than she felt. Carmen scrolled through articles. Most of it speculation right now. Questions about what role you played at Harrington's, whether you contributed to their award-winning dishes, why you left. There's a lot of comparison between old Harrington's work and your current stuff at Bennett's Table. People noting the stylistic similarities. Are they mentioning the NDA? Not yet. But Isla, divorce records are public. Someone will pull the settlement documents eventually. Then I need to get ahead of this. I need to make a statement before someone else writes my story for me. Are you sure? Once you start talking about Harrington's, Julian might claim you're violating the agreement. The NDA prevents me from claiming credit for specific Harrington's dishes. It doesn't prevent me from acknowledging I worked there or discussing my general role. Isla stood, pacing her small apartment. I won't violate the legal terms, but I also won't let Julian control this narrative anymore. What are you going to say? The truth. As much of it as I legally can. Isla gave one interview. Just one. To Chicago Magazine, the same publication that had featured David Chen's glowing review. She sat across from Catherine Mills, a respected food journalist known for tough but fair reporting, and told her story. I met Julian Harrington 9 years ago when I was a sous chef. I joined his family's firm as a junior architect. Wait, wrong story. Isla smiled slightly, nerves showing. I joined his restaurant project as a chef, and we fell in love. We got married. We worked together for 7 years building Harrington's, and then we got divorced. Those are the facts. Catherine leaned forward, recorder between them. But what was your role at Harrington's? The dishes that made that restaurant famous. Did you contribute to those? I was part of the creative team, yes. I can't speak to specific projects, specific dishes, because of the terms of my divorce settlement. But I will say that during my time there I learned an enormous amount about cooking, about innovation, about pushing boundaries. That education informs everything I do now at Bennett's Table. People are saying that your current work is stylistically very similar to Harrington's output from 5 to 8 years ago, before the divorce. Isla chose her words carefully. I think what people are noticing is that my culinary philosophy has been consistent. Whether that philosophy was expressed through Harrington's or through Bennett's Table, the core principles remain the same. Innovation, sustainability, emotionally resonant food. Those values don't change based on whose name is on the door. Did Julian Harrington support your decision to start your own venture? My ex-husband and I have very different perspectives on many things. That's why we're no longer married. There's speculation that you were the creative force behind Harrington's success, that Julian Harrington has been taking credit for your work. Can you comment on that? I can't comment on that without potentially violating my settlement agreement. What I can say is this. I'm proud of the work I'm doing now at Bennett's Table. It's entirely mine, documented and provable, and I hope people will judge me based on what I'm creating today, not speculation about the past. Do you think you deserved more credit for Harrington's success than you received? I think the food speaks for itself. Isla met Catherine's eyes directly. People who understand cooking can look at Harrington's menu from 5 years ago and Bennett's Table menu now and draw their own conclusions about stylistic consistency and creative voice. One last question. Bennett's Table has become the hottest reservation in Chicago. You've been called the most exciting chef in the city. How does that feel? Especially given what you've been through. It feels like I finally proved everything I needed to prove. That woman Julian called just an employee. That woman he said was replaceable. That woman he erased from the story of his success. She just got recognized as one of Chicago's best chefs. And she did it completely on her own terms. The interview ran with a headline that was both fair and incendiary. Isla Bennett on life after Harrington's, building a legacy that's entirely mine. It was perfect. Classy, professional, revealing just enough to make readers draw their own conclusions without Isla explicitly violating the NDA's restrictions. She came across as talented, gracious, and wronged. Julian, by implication, came across as someone who might have been taking credit for work he hadn't done alone. The culinary community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support for Isla. Young chefs, especially women, shared the article with comments about being undervalued and uncredited in their own kitchens. Hashtag Isla Bennett trended for 3 days straight. Food historians began pulling old Harrington's menus, comparing them to Bennett's Table offerings. The stylistic similarities were undeniable. The innovative techniques, the sustainable ingredient choices, the emotional storytelling through food. It was all there in the old work, and it was all present in Isla's current cooking. People started asking uncomfortable questions. If Isla Bennett's culinary philosophy was so consistent, and if Harrington's work had changed dramatically after her departure, what did that say about who had really been the creative genius? Articles began appearing with careful language that didn't make direct accusations but raised obvious doubts. Harrington's creative evolution, a timeline. Comparing Harrington's before and after Isla Bennett, the culinary voice behind Chicago's most celebrated restaurant. Julian issued a statement through a publicist within 48 hours. Isla was a valued member of our team during her time at Harrington's. I wish her continued success with her own venture. It was bland, corporate, defensive, and it made him look worse than if he'd said nothing at all. The statement confirmed Isla had been part of the team, but didn't acknowledge her creative role. It sounded exactly like what it was. A powerful person trying to minimize someone's contributions. The court of public opinion began rendering its verdict, and it wasn't in Julian's favor. Within 2 weeks of the Chicago Magazine interview, Harrington's lost a major commission bid. A hotel group that had been in talks for a destination restaurant concept chose a younger, more innovative firm instead. Then, another client pulled out of preliminary discussions. The whisper campaign had started. Julian Harrington isn't the genius we thought he was. His ex-wife was the real talent all along. Isla watched it unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She'd never wanted to destroy Julian. She just wanted recognition for her own work, the chance to build something that couldn't be taken from her. But the industry had made its judgment, and once that kind of doubt entered the conversation, it was almost impossible to remove. 18 months after David Chen's review, 14 months after the divorce connection became public knowledge, Isla received an invitation that would change everything. The Chicago Culinary Foundation was launching something extraordinary, a competition to determine the city's most innovative chef. The winner would receive a $1 million grant to open their dream restaurant, plus features in every major food publication in the country. 10 chefs were invited to compete. The selection committee had chosen the most influential culinary voices in Chicago, a mixture of established names and rising stars. Julian Harrington received an invitation. He was still, despite the whispers, one of Chicago's most prominent restaurateurs. 3 Michelin stars, a James Beard Award, decades of family reputation. Isla Bennett received an invitation. The dark horse, the underground sensation, the chef who'd appeared from nowhere with undeniable talent and a complicated history. For the first time since the divorce, they would compete directly, publicly, with the entire culinary world watching. Carmen had burst into the warehouse kitchen where Isla was prepping for that night's service. You got invited to the foundation competition. Isla's hands stilled on the vegetables she'd been cutting. How do you know that? Because I got the call. They wanted to confirm you'd accept before sending the formal invitation. Carmen's expression was fierce. You're going to do it, right? Julian will be there. So what? You're not violating the NDA by competing in a culinary competition. You're not talking about Harrington's. You're just cooking under your own name with your own recipes. He'll recognize me. We'll be in the same room. Good. Let him see what he threw away. Let him see you succeeding without him. Carmen moved closer. Isla, for 18 months you've been cooking in a warehouse, proving you're extraordinary. This is your chance to show everyone, including Julian Harrington, exactly who the real genius always was. Isla thought about the tiny studio apartment, the diner job she'd finally quit 6 months ago, the slow rebuild from absolute zero. Thought about every humiliation, every moment of doubt, every night she'd wanted to give up. Thought about Julian's voice saying you're replaceable. You were never cut out for my world. You were just an employee. When's the first challenge? 3 weeks. Carmen grinned. Should I tell them yes? Tell them yes. The competition was structured as 3 challenges over 3 weeks. Each challenge would be judged by a panel of James Beard Award winners, Michelin-starred chefs from other cities, and food journalists. People who had no loyalty to Chicago's established hierarchy, who would judge purely on merit. Challenge 1. Create a dish representing your culinary identity. The competitors gathered in a professional kitchen space the foundation had rented for the event. 10 chefs, each representing a different vision of Chicago's dining scene. Established names, rising stars, and 2 people with a very complicated history. Julian arrived in a town car, perfectly dressed, every inch the successful restaurateur. He smiled for the cameras, shook hands with the other competitors, projected confidence and control. Then Isla walked in, and his face went completely blank. She moved through the space with quiet confidence, setting up her station, acknowledging the other chefs politely. She didn't look at Julian, didn't acknowledge him, simply focused on the work ahead. But she could feel his eyes on her, could sense his shock at seeing her here, competing against him, refusing to disappear the way he'd expected. The judges explained the first challenge. You have 3 hours to create a dish that represents your culinary identity, your voice as a chef, what you stand for in the kitchen. This isn't about impressing us with technique alone. We want to understand who you are through your food. Isla had known exactly what she'd create the moment she received the invitation. She made a deconstructed cassoulet, her grandmother's recipe, the dish that had started everything, reimagined through every technique she'd mastered over 15 years of cooking. The duck confit was perfect, the skin shatteringly crisp, the white beans were creamy and rich, each one seasoned individually. The sausage was house-made, exactly the way her grandmother had taught her. But the presentation was entirely modern, each component placed with artistic precision, sauces dotted and swooshed, garnishes adding color and texture. It honored her heritage while showcasing her innovation. It was traditional and modern, comforting and surprising, technically flawless and emotionally devastating. It was everything Isla Bennett was as a chef. Julian created a beef Wellington variation. Beautiful, certainly. Technically impressive. The pastry was perfect, the beef cooked precisely to temperature, the mushroom duxelles rich and earthy. But it was safe, conservative. The kind of dish that would appeal to traditional fine dining sensibilities without taking any real risks. The judges tasted in silence, making notes, discussing in low voices. When the scores were announced, Isla was in first place. Julian was in fourth. The other competitors congratulated Isla warmly. A few shot curious glances between her and Julian, clearly aware of their history, wondering what this competition would become. Julian approached Isla as they were packing up their stations. Congratulations. His voice was tight, controlled. That was an impressive dish. Thank you. Isla didn't stop working, didn't give him the satisfaction of her full attention. I didn't know you'd be competing. The foundation invited me. I accepted. Yes, like you did. This is going to be difficult if we can't be professional with each other. Isla finally looked at him fully. I'm being completely professional, Julian. I showed up. I cooked my best. I respected the competition. That's professional. If you're uncomfortable, that's not my problem. She walked away before he could respond. Challenge 2 came a week later. Take a cheap ingredient and elevate it to fine dining. Isla chose chicken liver, often dismissed, usually relegated to pâté or discarded entirely. She created a multi-component dish that showcased the ingredient in 5 different preparations. A silky mousse, a crispy fried medallion, a delicate terrine, a rich pan sauce, a light, airy chip for texture. Each element demonstrated a different technique, a different way of understanding the ingredient. Together, they created something transcendent. The judges audibly gasped when they tasted it. Julian did an admittedly clever play on Chicago-style hot dogs, deconstructed, elevated, technically sound. But next to Isla's work, it looked gimmicky, like he was trying to be creative rather than actually being creative. The scores came in. Isla remained in first place. Julian dropped to 6th. The culinary world was buzzing. Social media exploded with commentary. Who was this Isla Bennett? How had she become so extraordinarily talented? And why was Julian Harrington, the presumed favorite, being so thoroughly outclassed? The journalists who'd made the connection to Isla's history with Harrington's began writing careful think pieces. The timing was too perfect to ignore. A former employee competing against her ex-husband, the woman whose contributions had been questioned competing against the man who'd taken credit. This wasn't just a cooking competition anymore. This was about power, about recognition, about who deserved to be called a genius. The day before the third and final challenge, Isla received a phone call from a number she hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Julian's voice was strained when she answered. We should talk. Privately. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Isla. Just coffee. 20 minutes. There are things I need to say to you. Against her better judgment, curiosity won. They met at a neutral coffee shop in River North, far from Harrington's, far from Bennett's table, far from anywhere either of them had history. Julian looked older, stressed. The Polish was still there, but underneath was something fragile. He waited until they both had coffee before speaking. You can't win this competition. Isla stirred her coffee calmly. Can't or shouldn't? Isla, if you win, people will ask more questions. They'll dig deeper into your time at Harrington's. You could be seen as violating the NDA. I haven't mentioned Harrington's once in this competition. Every dish I've created is original. Every interview I've given focuses on Bennett's table and my current work. I'm not violating anything. Your very presence in this competition implies a connection to my restaurant, to my reputation. Your reputation? Isla's calm cracked slightly, anger bleeding through. Julian, I'm competing under my maiden name, cooking my own recipes, building my own legacy. If people are asking questions, it's because my food is undeniably excellent. And maybe, just maybe, they're wondering how Harrington's was so innovative when I was there and has been so conservative since I left. Julian's jaw tightened. You're trying to destroy me. I'm trying to cook. You're the one who made this personal when you erased my contributions and threw me away for someone with better social connections. I'm just doing what you told me to do, finding something else to do with my life. Is it my fault that I'm better at it than you anticipated? I made you, Isla. Without my restaurant, my resources, my platform, you never would have had the opportunity to develop your skills. Without me, you're just a man with money playing chef. Isla leaned forward. You're about to be proven right about one thing, though. What's that? That I was always the talent. You were just the bankroll. She stood, leaving money on the table for her untouched coffee. Your 20 minutes are up. Isla walked out, leaving Julian surrounded by cold coffee and the realization that he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation about what would happen when she finally had a chance to compete on equal footing. My friends, before we see how this final challenge unfolds, I need you to pause with me for a moment. Take a breath. Because this story, Isla's journey from betrayal to this moment, it's not just about cooking or restaurants or divorce. It's a mirror, and I need you to look into it honestly. How many of you watching right now have been where Isla was? Maybe not with recipes or kitchens, but with ideas stolen at work, with credit taken by someone else, with love that turned out to be exploitation, with partnerships that were never really equal. Someone took your work and put their name on it. Someone dismissed your contributions as insignificant. Someone made you feel like you were lucky to be included in building something that you were actually creating. Here's what I need you to understand. The people who try to erase you do it because they know your value. They wouldn't bother stealing if what you created wasn't extraordinary. Julian didn't dismiss Isla because she was mediocre. He dismissed her because he needed her genius, but couldn't stand sharing the spotlight. He knew, somewhere deep down, that she was the real innovator. That's why he made sure his name was on everything. That's why he threatened her legally. That's why he's terrified now watching her succeed. When someone tries to make you invisible, it's because you shine too bright for their comfort. They can't dim you through honest competition, so they use legal structures, social pressure, fear, manipulation. They make you doubt your own value so you won't fight for recognition. But here's what Isla understood, and I pray you understand it too. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. Isla didn't win because she sought revenge. She didn't spend years trying to expose Julian or destroy his reputation or make him suffer. She could have done that. Could have gone to the press immediately, violated the NDA, forced a public battle. Instead, she created something so undeniably excellent that the truth revealed itself. She let her work speak louder than any accusation ever could. That's the lesson, beloved. Your best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's becoming so magnificent at what you do that your talent becomes undeniable. It's building something so genuine that people recognize the difference between real innovation and someone coasting on stolen glory. But I know some of you are in the valley right now. You're in the part of the story where everything's been taken, where starting over seems impossible, where the person who hurt you is thriving while you're struggling to survive. You're working the equivalent of that diner job, flipping eggs when you used to run the kitchen. You're in the tiny apartment when you used to have the brownstone. You're anonymous when you used to be somebody. And it feels like the betrayal won, like the person who stole from you got away with it. Like justice will never come, so let me pray for you right now. Let me speak life over your situation. Let me ask God to do for you what he did for Isla. Heavenly Father, I lift up every person watching who's been betrayed, dismissed, erased, The ones who poured their hearts into partnerships that proved false. The ones who gave their best and watched someone else take credit. The ones who are starting over with nothing but their talent and their refusal to quit. Lord, give them Isla's strength. Give them the patience to rebuild when they want immediate justice. Give them the wisdom to create rather than destroy. Give them opportunities to showcase their genuine gifts in ways that can't be denied or stolen. Protect their hearts from bitterness. That's the real danger, Father. Not the person who betrayed them, but the bitterness that can poison their own future. Keep their hearts soft. Keep their spirits focused on building, not destroying. Protect them from giving up. On the hard days, when the diner job feels humiliating and the studio apartment feels like failure and starting over feels impossible, remind them that this is preparation, not punishment. Protect their futures from being defined by who betrayed them instead of who they're becoming. They're not somebody's ex-employee or ex-spouse or ex-partner. They're your child, with gifts you placed inside them that can't be stolen by any legal document or any person's denial. Father, I pray that everyone watching who's in their rebuilding season can see it the way you see it. You're not just restoring what they lost. You're preparing them for something bigger than what was taken, something that's completely, undeniably, permanently theirs. Bless the work of their hands. Every late night, every small step, every moment of creating when no one's watching. You're watching, Father. You're keeping track. You're building something they can't even see yet. Bless the creativity of their minds. Protect their innovation. Protect their voice. Don't let the betrayal silence what you've given them to say, to create, to build. Bless the resilience of their spirits. They're stronger than they know. They've survived what should have destroyed them. That's not luck, Father. That's you holding them together. And Lord, let them rise so magnificently that everyone who dismissed them has to witness the truth of who they always were, not for revenge, not to make anyone suffer, but so the truth can be seen, so justice can be done, so your glory can be revealed in their comeback story. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Now, let's see how Isla's story reaches its climax. Because the final challenge is where everything comes together, where 2 years of rebuilding, of patience, of strategic silence, becomes undeniable public victory. Challenge 3. Create a complete dining experience. Appetizer, main course, dessert. Each dish had to be perfect. Each had to tell a story. Each had to represent the chef's ultimate vision. 3 hours, the biggest stage in Chicago culinary competition, and Isla was about to cook the meal of her life. She'd planned this menu in her mind for weeks. Every element carefully considered. Every technique deliberately chosen. This wasn't just about winning a competition. This was about proving, once and for all, who she was as a chef. The appetizer was a study in contrasts. Delicate smoked trout paired with bold horseradish cream. Familiar flavors elevated through precise technique and unexpected presentation. It was approachable and sophisticated, comforting and surprising. It made the judges lean forward, fully engaged. The main course was technically flawless. A perfectly cooked lamb loin with charred edges and impossibly tender interior, accompanied by spring vegetables prepared 5 different ways. Each vegetable showcased a different technique. Roasted, pickled, pureed, raw, fried. Together, they created a conversation about seasonality and sustainability, and the chef's responsibility to ingredients. But it was the dessert that made the judges weep. A meditation on memory and transformation. Isla recreated her grandmother's apple tart, the first thing she'd ever learned to cook. But she deconstructed it, reimagined it, transformed it into something that honored the past while celebrating the future. Caramelized apple in 5 textures. Pastry cream infused with vanilla bean from her grandmother's recipe. A delicate tuile stamped with her grandmother's handwriting. Crystallized flowers from her grandmother's garden that Isla had been cultivating for 2 years. It was personal and universal, traditional and modern. A story about where she came from and where she was going, about loss and resurrection, about taking what you've been given and creating something entirely new. The judges tasted in absolute silence. Then one of them, a 3 Michelin star chef from New York, set down her fork with tears in her eyes. This is why we cook. This is what food can be when it comes from a place of truth. Julian's meal was beautiful, competent, expensive. He'd created a beef dish with black truffle, a lobster course with champagne foam, a chocolate dessert with gold leaf. It was impressive. It was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end restaurant. But next to Isla's work, the difference was stark. Julian had created a meal to impress. Isla had created a meal to move, to connect, to remind people why they loved food in the first place. When the scores were announced, Isla had won by the widest margin in the competition's 15-year history. She stood on that stage, under bright lights, surrounded by cameras and press and everyone who mattered in Chicago's culinary world. The check for $1 million was symbolic, oversized for photos. The real grant would be transferred electronically, but the symbolism mattered. This was public validation, industry-wide recognition, proof that Isla Bennett was not just talented, but the best. In the audience, Julian sat with Victoria. His expression was carefully controlled, professionally gracious in defeat. But Isla could see the devastation underneath, the understanding of what this moment meant. His ex-wife, the woman he'd called replaceable, had just beaten him decisively in front of everyone who mattered. The woman he'd tried to erase had become undeniable. This grant will allow me to open my first permanent restaurant. Isla spoke into the microphone, her voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. A place where innovative cooking meets accessibility, where technique serves flavor, serves emotion, where we remember that food, at its best, nourishes more than bodies. It nourishes souls. The applause was thunderous. But Isla wasn't finished. She had something else to say, something that had been building for 2 years. I want to dedicate this win to everyone who's ever been told they're not enough. Her voice strengthened, carrying to every corner of the room. Everyone who's had their work dismissed or stolen. Everyone who's had to start over from nothing and build something beautiful from the ashes. Your talent is yours. Your worth is yours. And nobody can take that from you unless you let them. The standing ovation lasted a full 3 minutes. Young chefs, especially women, had tears streaming down their faces. They saw in Isla their own stories, their own battles, their own refusal to be diminished. After the formal ceremony ended, a young woman approached Isla nervously. She was maybe 25, portfolio clutched to her chest. Chef Bennett, I just graduated from culinary school. I read about what happened with your ex-husband, how he tried to erase your contributions. My boyfriend keeps taking credit for my recipe ideas, and I was thinking about letting it go because I love him and I don't want to seem difficult. But seeing you here tonight, winning this, it made me realize something. What's that? That I deserve better. That my work deserves my name on it. Isla took the young woman's hands, looked her directly in the eyes. You do deserve better. And you're capable of more than you can imagine. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not your boyfriend, not a future employer, not anyone. Make sure your name is on your work. Make sure you get credit for what you create. Don't make my mistakes. The young woman left with renewed determination, and Isla felt a sense of purpose beyond her own success. She wasn't just winning for herself. She was changing the industry, making it safer for the next generation of talented women to get the recognition they deserved. Carmen appeared with champagne and a triumphant grin. How does it feel being officially recognized as Chicago's most innovative chef while your ex-husband placed 6th? It feels earned. Isla accepted the glass. Every step of this journey, every success, every dish, I did it myself. No one can take that from me. He's watching you again. I know. This time, Isla didn't bother looking back. But I'm done living my life in response to Julian Harrington's choices. This success isn't about him. It never was. She raised her glass to the room, to her future, to the brilliant young chefs who would follow in her footsteps and refuse to be diminished. 2 years after winning the competition, Isla stood in the kitchen of Bennett's. Not a pop-up anymore, but a full restaurant in West Loop, 40 seats. A Michelin star earned within 6 months of opening, a waiting list that stretched 3 months into the future. It was a Wednesday night, and Isla was doing what she loved most, creating. The kitchen hummed with controlled energy. Her team moved with precision, executing the vision she'd developed over years of experimentation. Every person in that kitchen knew exactly what they were doing, knew they were part of something special. Carmen appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was no longer just Isla's business partner. She was the restaurant's general manager, co-owner, the person who made sure Bennett's ran smoothly while Isla focused on the food. Chef, there's someone here to see you. I'm in the middle of service. Isla didn't look up from the plate she was finishing. Tell them to make a reservation, like everyone else. It's Julian Harrington. Isla's hands stilled for just a moment. Then she continued plating, precise movements uninterrupted. Tell him I'm in the middle of service. He says it's important. Then he can make a reservation and I'll cook for him like anyone else. The wait list is currently 14 weeks. Carmen grinned. I'll let him know. But 10 minutes later, Carmen was back. He's not leaving, Isla. He's sitting at the bar, and he looks devastated. Broken, actually. Isla sighed, wiped her hands, and stepped out of the kitchen for the first time all night. The dining room was full, every table occupied by guests savoring her food. The atmosphere was warm, intimate, exactly what she'd envisioned. And at the bar, looking completely out of place, sat Julian Harrington. He stood when he saw her approach. Isla, thank you for seeing me. I'm not seeing you. I'm in the middle of service. You have 2 minutes. Harrington's is closing. The words came out flat, defeated. We lost our 3rd Michelin star last year. Lost the 2nd one 3 months ago. Reservations are down 70%. The Ashmore partnership fell through when Victoria's father realized I wasn't the culinary genius I'd claimed to be. Isla felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a profound absence of emotional investment. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. Julian gave a hollow laugh. You shouldn't be. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I valued the wrong things. Because I thought reputation mattered more than reality. Because I was too insecure to share credit with someone more talented than me. Why are you telling me this, Julian? Because I want you to know that you were right. About everything. You were the genius. I was just the money. And without you, I'm nothing special. Just another rich guy with a restaurant that people have stopped caring about. Isla studied the man she'd once loved, once built dreams with, once trusted completely. He looked smaller now, worn down by failure, by the consequences of his own choices. I hope you find your way. She meant it without emotion. I hope you learn to value the right things. But Julian, you and we're finished. I don't hate you. I don't think about you. You're just someone who used to matter but doesn't anymore. She turned to go back to her kitchen, but paused. One more thing. There are talented chefs everywhere looking for opportunities. People who deserve credit for their work. If you're going to rebuild Harrington's, do it right this time. Give credit where it's due. Be the partner you should have been. Maybe then you'll create something real. Isla didn't wait for his response. She returned to her kitchen, to the controlled chaos of service, to the work she loved, to the team that respected her, to the life she'd built that was completely, undeniably, permanently hers. Through the pass, she could see guests tasting her food, their expressions transforming with delight. Carmen managing the floor with grace and expertise. The future she'd created, not in spite of being betrayed, but because surviving it had forged her into someone stronger. Julian Harrington had tried to erase her from the story of his success. And Isla Bennett had responded by writing a completely new story, one where she wasn't a footnote or a hidden contributor, one where her name was on everything, one where her talent was undeniable and her triumph was complete. That night, after service ended and the last guest departed, Isla stood alone in her kitchen. Her kingdom, the physical manifestation of everything she'd rebuilt from nothing. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, standing in Julian's office, being told she was replaceable, believing for just a moment that maybe he was right, that maybe she really didn't belong in his world. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different life, a different universe. Isla had been broken down to nothing and rebuilt herself into something extraordinary, not in spite of what Julian had done to her, but in some ways because of it. She'd needed to lose everything to discover what she was truly capable of creating. The best revenge, she'd learned, wasn't making someone suffer. It was becoming so successful that the person who tried to destroy you could only watch from the sidelines, finally understanding the magnitude of what they lost. If you made it to the end of this story, I want you to know something. Ila's strength is already inside you. Whatever you're building right now, whoever told you that you're not enough, whatever was stolen from you, you can do what Isla did. Not with bitterness or revenge, but with quiet, relentless determination to create something so excellent it speaks for itself. Subscribe to Billionaire's Romance Stories by Dennis and join a family that believes your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of triumph over betrayal, of silence turning into power, of people who refuse to stay down. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what are you building that will prove your doubters wrong? I read every single one. I want to hear your story. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that being underestimated isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of proving everyone wrong. Until the next story, remember this. The people who tried to erase you did it because your light was too bright for them to dim. So, shine anyway. Shine brighter. Shine until your success is the only truth anyone can see. Subscribe, believe, and never let anyone steal your crown.